Hello, I'm your host, Effie Pilarino, and today I have the pleasure, first of all, of being in Greece on the island where I was born and raised, and reaching out to the other side of the world, to Latin America, to Dr. Alejandro Betancourt. Welcome, Alejandro.
Thank you, Effie. Thanks for having me. I'm very happy and glad to be here with you.
I have to thank LinkedIn. I always love to connect with new people. I was drawn to some of the content that you share around mainly artificial intelligence and data in the fintech space, as you are truly a specialist or truly you have, I would say, the unique combination of having the academic background. If I understand correctly, you have a PhD in cognitive environments, correct? And your undergraduate is in applied math. But more importantly, you've done a lot of research and worked with Andrew Ng, if I pronounce his name correctly, and published a lot of work. Can you tell us briefly about that so we understand where you're coming from?
Yeah, perfect. You mentioned it right. So yeah, I made a PhD in cognitive environments, actually in Italy and in Netherlands, in the University of Eindhoven and the University of Genova. And after that, I decided to move to the industry. Like, I was really interested to apply everything I have been learning about applied mathematics, about artificial intelligence, and so on in the industry. So then I start a very exciting but a diverse journey applying AI in different fields. So first I moved to Belgium, from Netherlands to Belgium, to work for TP Vision, which is Philips Television, and I was creating algorithms for picture quality. Then I moved to my home country, not my hometown, to work for an oil and gas company. So we were creating the full digital transformation of that oil and gas company, which is the largest one in Colombia. And in the process, I get contacted by Andrew, and we start chatting about and how Latin America can become a AI hub. And there are a lot of talent, a lot of universities that can contribute to the field. Like, there is really a scarce talent in the field. So every country can play a significant role in this shift of artificial intelligence. So after a couple of months talking with Andrew, I decided to join Landing AI as AI technical lead to work with him. We made, that was before pandemic. So we start making a lot of events in Latin America, spreading the word of AI, showing how it can be applied in manufacturing, in computer vision. We put some of the first building blocks of what Landing AI has today, that is Landing Lens, and very, very great job the team is doing there. And after that, I get involved with a couple of entrepreneurs. So 2 entrepreneurs in the fintech sector. I spoke with them like for 1 year. Like, it was more like a friendship, and they were asking me like, why don't you leave Landing AI and join us in that moment was called Omni Latam, and join us in Omni Latam, which is now Climb. And after a lot of conversation, I decided like, okay, was in the middle of the pandemic. So I said like, okay, I want a change. That was the kind of inflection point of the pandemic. And then I joined them in this journey in the fintech sector, which is now 3 years. And basically, the reason I joined them is because there is a lot of data in the field we are working on. So I was always eager to how to apply artificial intelligence and where to find a huge amount of data that we can use to train models to estimate risk, to have more asset under management with low risk, and so on. So that was the driver actually to join the company. And we are doing like very exciting work in Latin America with a lot of innovation that a lot of people ask us like, why that innovation is coming from Latin America? Why it doesn't come to US? Maybe we'll talk later about that, Effie.
Yeah. You know, as I was mentioning to you offline, I have a major affinity to Latin America, as it was a significant part of my early career in on Wall Street. And there's definitely innovation that, you know, we could start explaining it. A big part has to do with human resources, with the people that are not only well trained, in my opinion, extremely creative. The other reason, I think, is that there are real big problems, and people sort of have this attitude that let's take it in our hands to solve it. And I guess that's where we're seeing innovation. And when you're in the West, whether, you know, especially in Europe, we hear more about the big scaled fintechs, and mainly about the consumer facing ones, you know, like Nubank and so on. Of course, we all know that the big innovation that has network effects is at the B2B level and at the infrastructure level. And again, we hear a lot about that, and we understand, especially in payments, you know, the Brazilian PIX system and things like that. But from what I understand, there's a lot of innovation that will soon have ripple effects and network effects that we are not so aware, or the media is not so much talking about. And I wanted to hear from you, what are these innovations that we should be focused on, and which are the sectors where you think that the subsectors, there is innovation that differs from the developed market innovation, and hopefully later developed markets could benefit from that too.
Yeah, okay, so I will let me tackle that question in two ways. Like the first one is something I used to present a lot with Andrew, and is very general, is where AI can really add value. So there are a lot of, like, we used to create a very simple diagram, Venn diagram, on which you have everything that AI can solve and everything that the business can need. AI cannot solve everything of the business. It's like just in the intersection where the real return of investment from AI and the value will be created. So what is that intersection? That's actually the question for fintechs, for manufacturers, for every industry. Like, what is that intersection? Because there is a lot of AI evolution, and it's amazing. It's very exciting. Like, go and read what is happening with large language models, with computer vision, and so on. That's super exciting. Like, it's impossible to actually keep yourself in the state of the art reading about every single topic these days related with AI. But if you focus on that intersection, there is a lot to do. So the second part to answer that is there is a field in the region in Latin America that actually is years ahead than other regions. Let me tell you why, and let me tell you how it started, and that's actually why I found it interesting to join Climb. Like, in Latin America, we used to have some governments, and evasion was very high. So one of the countries in Latin America, Chile, actually started creating in 2012 the invoicing system. That was just to being able to track transactions and understand taxation and improve taxation, right?
Was that just digitalization of processes that were paper-based?
Exactly. So basically, you have a shift on which an invoice stopped being just a paper that you sign and you send to the other, and you said, okay, I will pay you in 90 days, to become a full digital asset. So now it's like you can have a central system on which every invoice is registered. And that was in 2012. That doesn't appear for 10 years. From that point, 10 years later, in Europe, there was no conversation really about standards and so on. So
this is not something, this happened from the public sector, right? It's not a private sector initiative where, you know, some vendor is selling a SaaS way of doing this. This is
no, ERPs were doing something, but this is still like ERP sell it to a big corporate. The big corporate has the ERP, some kind of digital, but it was government sector. Like government start creating the infrastructure and the technology to centralize those invoices. And an additional thing happened 5 years later, and it was something that we call the central registry. So if I have an invoice, I can go and say, okay, now I'm not the owner anymore of this invoice. So let's assume I issue an invoice of $10 million. You tell me, okay, I need 90 days to pay you. And I need it. So it's 90 days that I have a paper that is worth $10 million. So I can use that money to actually start working, right? So I take that piece of paper and I go and find a bank or a factoring or client and tell them, hey, look, can you advance me these 90 days, these $10 million, charge me a fee, and I can have the money now, start working with the money, but that invoice is now yours.
Yep.
So for 5 years in Chile as well, it was like, I sign a paper again, so I have the invoice, and I said, okay, now the owner is client, I sign a paper, and then you go and try and collect the money at the end of the process. Okay, so that's the second step of maturity that happened in this ecosystem. So they centralize that as well. So at some point, I just issue an invoice, it appeared in the invoicing system. And second, if I finance the invoice, I can digitally say, okay, this invoice is now from Alejandro. So you create a fully digital asset that you can finance in different state of maturity and risk. And that actually create a big financial market in Chile, and that started replicating through countries. So invoicing, for example, there is some standards that are being adopted worldwide, like it's called UBL 2.1. Europe is creating the full invoicing ecosystem based on UBL 2.1 there. But then Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, now Brazil, like every country in Latin America start creating this invoicing and the regulation for central registries of invoices, right? So you have, and when you introduce that central registry regulation, what we have seen in Chile and in Colombia, that is where we operate right now with Brazil, that when you introduce that, basically your market can multiply in orders of magnitude of 10 of the financial asset you can have, which is kind of changing from like giving every supplier the capability to go to the market, finance their invoices, and then work with those invoices. It creates a big financial market.
Liquidity that is unbelievable suddenly, right?
Exactly, and the economies actually accelerate. So there is a lot of studies that show that, okay, if you are basically unlocking the money, so this money that somehow is unlocked in the supply chain world, and then what you are doing with this financial product is unlocking that money so people can maintain their companies and industries working at full speed. It's like, imagine removing every dollar that is stock in the market for 90 days, 60 days. Like you will have a lot of liquidity and money moving.
Yeah, I mean, cash flow management, working capital, everything, no bottlenecks there, right? You're making the process seamlessly and hopefully also pricing the risks correctly in this process.
And that is where they hire me. So imagine all that information. So we go, I know you are very passionate expert about open finance, open banking, open data. So imagine that governments in Latin America, 10 years before everybody was speaking about that, was creating kind of the first open finance ecosystem. Not completely open, but you have at least the central information. That was crazy. Like when we speak about that with investors, and it's really top tier investors, they say like, look, at the beginning I didn't believe that innovation came from there, but now that I see the data, it's like, this is really, really, really crazy. It's like when we go to with our suppliers, we work with them and we tell them like, okay, look, if we are going to integrate to your invoicing system, and then we are understanding your purchases, sales, taxes on real time. Like real time. Like you issue one invoice and 55 minutes later, we have the invoice completely scored, risk analyzed, priced, and so on in the system. So we can finance that invoice. At the beginning, I was like, no, that's not even possible. And for me, 45 minutes was like, come on, that's too fast to have an invoice with everything ready to be financed. There are people that actually issue the invoice and immediately call client and said, hey, look, I have this invoice. And our key accountant managers are like, look, I still don't see it. Like, it's like the invoice was issued, sent it to the central system and so on, and the people is already trying to finance it. So that's a big shift in how they finance
it's email or SMS type of efficiency and speed, right?
Exactly. So Effie, you know a lot about this. So imagine the effect that start happening with the network effect of the data that you start happening. So every company that actually we integrate with, which is just having access to the invoicing system, and after that we are integrated, is credentials, authorization, and so on, and exposed in average 200 other companies. So I saw your purchases and your sales, and in that moment we know everyone that is connected with you. So every company exposed in average 200 connections. So very quickly it became a nice graph of information that you can use to estimate the risk.
Real-time counterparty risk. I mean, I'm thinking of the financial crisis of 2008 in the US, right? It's got nothing to do with invoices, but they couldn't figure out the counterparty risks because they didn't have a system. It took some companies, it took them months. And here you're telling me that corporates, all businesses, can have real-time assessment of counterparty risk.
Yes.
Amazing.
That's exactly what I mentioned.
So if in Latin America, there was a blow up in one corporate, in one country, I mean, anybody that's in this network can immediately see what the exposure is, because the exposure might be because of 5 degrees of separation, right? Not the direct exposure.
Yes. So there are two things that we do. So there are also some less elaborate, but still very useful sites on which you can go and see when people register bankruptcy. So you can go and mark one of those notes as bankruptcy and start seeing who can be affected from that bankruptcy. 1-level connection, 2-level connection, 3rd-level connection, and so on. Yeah. And that's amazing.
Yeah. Now, Alejandro, who is taking advantage of this infrastructure? Where is it complete? Who is taking advantage? Is it fintechs only, or also banks that are using this data and capability to build services? Give us a sense of where this is at, because I assume it's not scaled completely, and there's, it's an evolution.
It's an evolution. In Chile, it's pretty mature. Colombia now is 1 year after central registry introduction, so it's still very mature or maturing. People is understanding more this. Brazil is introducing the central registry this year, and so on. I think the first beneficiary of this end up being the supplier. So the company that doesn't need to wait 30, 60, 90 days to work with their money, that's the first point. Definitely, like the main players in the bank are the main players in the product end up being the banks. So they have big capitals, and I will explain you where they play, because they are not covering the full ecosystem. So that create a space where fintechs can work as well. We are inclined working to make it infrastructure. Like we are working to create Climb as a Service, which is now we know how to operate. Okay, so we know how to operate supply chain finance. We know how to process invoices, estimate the risk, set the price, and so on. So we are basically making a product that funders, banks, and investors can use in order to allocate the money in this market. That's what we are trying to do. So I will say everybody can get a benefit. Even the payers can have a benefit there. So I will tell you how the payers of the invoice can have a benefit. There is something that is called rebate, and is okay. I still need some time so they can postpone. Okay, I have 30 days, but my payment calendar is the 20s. So can you finance those 10 days that doesn't fit? So I pay everything on time, and then those 10 days I pay you a fee. That's something that is called rebate, and payers get a benefit from that. There is other type of benefit from payers on the last part of the invoice life cycle, and is sometimes these big corporates can have extra liquidity. Okay. So they said, okay, I still have some cash. Can I use it actually to finance my programs? And that's also a variation of the product that can be done. I was going to mention about banks and why fintechs and so on. So what happened is, for example, banks used to go to the big corporate. So they go to the big corporate and they said, I want to create, and we have some of those programs with the largest Colombian and, for example, the largest Chilean company is one of the programs we have. So we go to the big corporates and we tell them, hey, let's open a supply chain finance program. Then they invite all the suppliers, and then we finance with them that. But that is very, very controlled. Imagine that you are a supplier.
Yeah.
Like center for 1 second in the supplier. You don't want to finance with one company, with the other, depending on who has the corporate program. You are now with the central registry, the owner of that particular invoice. So you can go and say, okay, who is going to give me a better discount rate, and which benefits, which is more fast, more digital. So in Klein, for example, it's 20 minutes for an operation to happen. Like 20 minutes. You go with the invoice, and 20 minutes later, the money is in your bank.
Wow.
For the banks, it can have weeks. So I go with an invoice, and then they start asking me, okay, bring me your financial statements. And at the end,
what is the process
in
these 20 minutes, Alejandro, that you mentioned? Is it a bidding process? How can I imagine that?
So what we do is we have like two ways. I will explain you the nicer one, which is how we are operating in Chile with these big companies. So Prime is orchestrating this three-sided ecosystem, okay, three-sided marketplace. So we sit in the middle, and every single invoice is scored by risk. So we go and said, using an artificial intelligence model proprietary in the company, we said, what is the probability of this invoice not being paid 90 days post due date? And we divide them in 4 groups, like A plus, A, B, and C. The A plus are the best, like the more secure invoices, and the C ones, let's say, they have market, okay? Yep. And then funders just simply go to the funder side and said, look, I want to invest this amount of money in A plus, this amount of money in A, this amount of money in B and C. And this is the rates I'm going to charge. What we do is the supplier then in their own platform and so on, they can go select 6 invoices, discount, the prices just get assigned from the funder configurations, and that's it. Then you can disburse the money on the other side.
Interesting.
And the challenging part, Effie, the data has to be closed. The data loop has to be closed. So we disburse the money. Now, where the payment happen? So the debtor has to, at the end of the 90 days, make the payment, and we need to register that payment. And there is other of the innovations that Latin America has, is because you have this central registry, you know the final owner of that invoice. So you can make a payment and define that payment for which invoice was for. So you close the loop of the data, and then you know what is happening with the invoices.
And this, Alejandro, doesn't exist in the developed world. What exists in the US or in Europe?
So let me go Europe. Europe Europe has nice things and challenging things. So Europe, for example, Portugal is releasing the central registry 2024. Germany, I think, is scaling their invoicing system to B2B in 2024 or 25, if I don't remember. So if you see, it's like 12 years of difference between Chile and what is happening with Europe. US has some particular stuff. It's like in US, a document, a paper with a signature is still a valid invoice. So in US, is way more challenging to scale it. There are strategies. We have been studying the US market for a couple of years, trying to understand how even using that type of invoicing and so on can be financed. So there are some supply chain finance companies in the US.
Is what you're saying that in the US, we don't even have the first step where the invoices are digitized, dematerialized, if you want.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
Exactly. So you have the payment networks, and basically maybe through the payment networks, something can be done. But the evolution is invoicing system, central registry, and then the market of this type of assets scale fast.
Very, very interesting. Oh, Alejandro, we could talk days about both what's going on in Latin America and this topic. I want to ask you, as a last part of our conversation, if you can share with us some of your thoughts, given the hype that is going on with AI in financial services, ChatGPT, and all this stuff. I mean, me personally, I think that the first subsectors in finance that are going to see more faster and sooner impact is the investment world. Because they have been familiar for a very long time with AI, and the advancements in AI will be much more easily integrated, especially in research. Analysts, all sorts of research in different assets. And because we can train on specific knowledge bases that have to do, with reports around companies or compliance and so on. That is my opinion, and less on consumer banking and these areas. I don't know, what is your first reaction, if you want, to all this hype?
I think it's very interesting what is happening in the field and the challenges that the financial sector have. So I think actually in finances, there was more quantitative analysis for years. There are the quants, the risk analysts, and so on. They were doing very nice stuff. What is the challenge there? What AI can change for them is that now you have way more data. I gave you already some idea of what type of data you are having. So now it's not only the formulation of how this finance can be modeled and so on. It's you can really take a model and a pile of data and go and see if you can train it better. What would be the challenge there is that financial sector is still ruled by the traditional way of doing the stuff. So something that we as data scientists or AI experts and so on, we face is when you have a model, sometimes you have a lot of confirmation bias from the stakeholders. You go and you said, okay, look, my model, this is the performance and so on. And they said, but why you are not taking into account this variable? That variable has to be the one that to be used. And you go and you use the variable, and it said, no, it's not significant for the performance of the model. And they are, no, but I need it because I know by my experience that that's useful. And that friction is super difficult to work with. And related to the other side that is work, is being in the internet and so on, very, very hot these days. Generative AI is of course, I think it's amazing technology. I use it very frequently, but I will tell you how I use it. For me, it's a creative assistant at this point. It's if I need to think something and start sketching something out or drafting an idea, it's a perfect assistant. To improve the content of the things we are creating is a perfect assistant. But to really jump and being able to make risk analysis and so on, there will be some time. I've seen some interesting initiative, Bloomberg, JP Morgan, they are training and fine-tuning these models on their own data sets. Definitely that can be helpful. But I still think there is a lot of things to do with AI and how it will change in the financial sector. I really think the main challenge will be how to do things different, like how to assume that a model can give you better results even if the traditional variables are not considered. That's something to really tackle.
So I mean, this is a very important and interesting insight that you're sharing with us, because it also makes challenging the fact that we want AI to be explainable. And this is clashing, so to speak, with the traditional or the professional thinking.
Depending on how you want it. So, and this is again something that I used to talk with Andrew a lot, and Andrew mentioned it in the conference. This is the classic question that people make to Andrew, and the best answer I have seen is coming from him is, do you need it explainable or do you need to trust the system? Okay. So do you know how medicine actually, every pill we take changes our bodies? I don't think so. But now you trust it because there are experiments, there are metrics, and they can show you, okay, these actually solve the health issue you have. So, and data scientists need to be very good on that. So manage stakeholders and tell them, okay, look, these are metrics. At the end, what matters to you are the metrics of the system. Like what is the accuracy, the precision, the recall, how many money are you leaving in the table, how many approvals you are doing, not understanding what exactly variable is doing it. And something that very frequently happens is when someone goes to a more, like basically why current systems are not explainable is because they are non-linear and more complex. So you cannot just really go and say, this is the variable that is playing with, right? But what happens is when someone trains a simpler model just to make it explainable, it's used a couple of times and then discarded. Like nobody check anymore the explainability of the model. Like once you trust it, it's like, okay, I don't want to go and check those variables every time to make a decision. Now tell me the decision, I will make it. So very quickly you make that shift. And something that is important in the sector is traceability. Explainability sometimes is confused with traceability because auditors and so on want to tell why you make some decisions. It's not in every country. Like some countries has stronger regulations about that. But then people said, okay, no, because auditors need to explain every single decision, then I need to have an explainable model, right? Maybe not. Maybe you just need to maintain what are the inputs to the model in that particular decision, what was the output of the model. So you can go and say, okay, I cannot explain you what exactly combination you made for that decision, but this was the system of the models. Maybe that's a point in the middle of this never-ending conversation of explainable versus not explainable.
Very interesting. I think that you're also confirming the fact that beyond the policies, we really have to think differently to use a technology like this in a different way than we are used to, because the types of AI that we've used up to now, and AI is an umbrella term, right? I mean, it's a huge sort of sector or different approaches. And now we are at a phase where we want to use these advancements, but we are thinking in the old way or the traditional way.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And sometimes like regulation is also a big conversation, but sometimes it's like we are creating a regulation for something we don't fully understand yet. So we are working, we are having the building modules and so on. There are also some conversation about maybe the large companies that are taking the advantage are just asking to regulate because they are already captured an advantage position. So I don't want people to innovate as fast as I could when there was loosey regulation. But that's something very interesting to keep reading. I know Europe is working on these regulatory frameworks and so on. So changes will happen and things will evolve.
And we need to continue discussing so people understand more, because it's out of confusion and there's a learning process, right? That we all need to go through, and we need to go through it together. So we use these technologies for the good, the broader good in different areas, right? Whether it's impacting financial lives, it can be in medicine, it can be, I mean, I'm reading great progress, especially in the medical profession, that is just very inspiring. So I feel that right now there's more hype and there's more fears out there and more confusion created, rather than, taking the time to talk to people like you and others and discuss and understand more and formulate opinions. Right?
Exactly. And like sometimes it's like when you start talking about that and so on, it's like a lot of these fears are actually coming from a lot of media, which actually are just very superficial stuff. Like there is not really fast way to do AI. Like there is a lot of effort. Like, of course, there are some technology that can be used, ChatGPT for some specific task and so on. But doing models, for example, the financial sector, take a lot of time. Like lot of time, lot of data, curating data, organizing the data, maintaining the pipelines. And that's a lot of work to do. It's like if we start adding extra tasks, it will be impossible to invest and creating real AI systems.
I understand. Alejandro, I'd like to thank you and close our discussion with something that is out of the finance and the data world. Tell us what your hobbies are, or what you're reading, or what you're listening. Share with us something that is more personal.
I don't have the book. I'm reading. Actually, I saw it on your LinkedIn or in LinkedIn. It was the Fintechs on the platform economies. I'm reading that. The book I'm reading right now.
Of Paolo.
Exactly. So I'm reading that book. I found it very interesting because it's very related what we are doing in Latam with client. So I'm finding some ideas there. It's like I already read once and then I go back highlighting some of the ideas that we have. That's what I'm reading. And as hobby, I like cycling. So I'm cycling 2-3 times per week. I just trying to stay at least not in bad shape.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Alejandro. It was really great speaking with you.
Thank you, Effie. It was very interesting conversation.